Hey guys, what's going on? John Coffey.
James Wolverton.
And this is Let's Talk Bourbon. So today we're going to talk about our roots, I guess you could call it, in bourbon. Get to know us a little bit better. Obviously you guys know we're fans, but maybe this is a little bit about our journey, a peek behind the barrel, if you will, on how we got into this whole thing. And so...
yeah, we've talked a lot about accolades, and there's a reason we then took time out of our busy schedules
to get their credentials, to go the distance and get a bourbon stewardship or executive bourbon stewardship.
Even get a job in periphery industry, just because there's a reason we fell in love with what we fell in love with. So neither of us are native, so neither of us really grew up with bourbon in our blood.
So we'd like to tell you a little bit about our story on what really were defining milestone bourbons that got us into it to begin with. We thought that might be kind of fun for y'all.
Yeah, get to know it a little bit better. You want to start, Mr. Coffey?
Sure. So, growing up in Ohio, I did not get a huge amount of exposure to great bourbons up there. So for me, I always thought it made sense to mix. And it wasn't until I moved down here, it's been over 12 years ago, that I got into bourbon pretty religiously. And honestly, I had a friend's girlfriend at the time tell me, why the hell do you keep mixing all this stuff? You need to start drinking that neat. And I said, man, that might be a little bit tough. But then she followed up with, why don't you start with it on the rocks? And for me at the time, I was drinking Woodford and ginger. That was kind of my go-to. And
good starter, boy.
And she said, well, why don't you step it up and drink a little bit more sophisticated bourbon and try that? So I went to Woodford Double Oak. That's what I got today. Man, I'll tell you, once I had it, just the amount of flavor that was in it. You can still find this today on the shelf. I mean, it's great stuff. But just knowing that that had so much bold flavor and characteristic, I said, maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I really need to reevaluate how I drink my bourbon. So I started out with Woodford Double Oaked in an ice cube, and man, that just made such a difference. And I would say probably that first year, that was probably a good go-to drink for me before I kind of stepped it up from there. So we can go ahead and give that a try. This is Hops to Go Barrel Pick number 1. They are no longer with us here in the Lexington area, but it's a private barrel pick of Woodford Double Oaked, which again makes it a little special. So we'll take a little bit of pour of that, and let's see here. So we'll do it 1 ounce.
Nice. Thank you, sir.
There we go.
So Woodford up in Versailles, just down the road from us here in Lexington. I know people from out of town.
Basically Millville, Kentucky. Yeah.
A wonderful
Beautiful
tour.
distillery. Chris Morris is the master distiller. Elizabeth's the master taster. Assistant master distiller.
Wonderful.
Just catch that nose.
Yeah, there's nothing.
And I've had thousands of bourbon, literally thousands of bourbon since this one, but I still think this is a great pour.
Yeah, oh yeah.
A lot of complexity. A lot of people ask me, what double oaked actually means. What they do is they'll age it in that barrel for 4 to 6 years. I believe it's at least a 4-year duration, up to 8 maybe even. Anything beyond 4 they don't have to age state, but then they will actually age it in another brand new.
So that's how they can get away so calling it bourbon, because they don't adjust it anyway. It's basically put it in another
they don't alter
brand
it, they don't
new
anything,
cask.
Put it in another barrel and let it age for a little bit longer. And so you get that 6 to 8 weeks, I think.
Yeah. So people there are a lot of bourbon. Snobs is tough, but snobs is accurate, that hate on Woodford, and accurate or not, most of them would say that the Double Oak cures a lot of the sweetness it tends to be almost too much present in a regular Woodford. Really gets mellowed, smoothed, and the tannins from that second barreling.
Yeah,
really
you get double the caramel, double the vanilla, double the tannin, but double the flavor. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a great one to bring someone into it. and really kind of show them what it is. Especially when you do add an ice cube or some water to this, you get some interesting flavors that kind of pop out of it on top of that.
I can see adding the cube to that. That makes a lot of sense.
So what about you, James?
So I grew up in Florida, came here to go to college at Eastern, go Colonels, I guess. A lot of $2 Jim Beams and Cokes at the end zone because they were cheap, and every now and then I would just have the Jim Beam. You know, the 90s, I did what everyone else did. I bought Makers because the bottles were really cool and you collected them. And I drank it, and I drank Woodford, but it was because you lived in Kentucky and that's just kind of what you did. It took me meeting Jimmy Russell at LB. Actually, I'll show off. This is probably one of my prized possessions, maybe 40th anniversary or something like that. It was back in 2003. That was back when still people were buying bottles to collect them, not to drink them. I was not a huge Wild Turkey fan because it was what bikers drank at bars. That's kind of for especially the 80s and the 90s, that was their rep. It was 101. I was scared of it.
Notice that 10-year age statement even on the label. See a lot of that going away these days, so that's pretty special.
And he took his time out and talked to me and really kind of opened my eyes to some young idiot. I was probably my late 20s, maybe early 30s. I had no idea what I was talking about, but that's why he took his time out, talked to me, educated me, informed me. So when you see that I'm a Wild Turkey homer, it's because a master distiller took his time out of his day when there was no one else around, which was embarrassing. I felt bad for him now, because now he would be mobbed. But back in 2003, it wasn't the same thing. There wasn't a horse on the bottle. But he took his time out and explained it, so it really began my true appreciation of what a bourbon can be. And the 10-year, I think, for especially a 10-year bourbon under $30 pretty consistently, you're not going to get much better than that.
Well, this one might be a little bit more. What you got going on here? It's a Russell's?
It's a Russell's 10-year. Love my wife. We couldn't, unfortunately, get the Pappy 20 in our last drawing, so we ended up, she got me 2 10s. I love the Russell's 10. Once again, for a 10-year aged, no, let's get the non-plastic side, age-stated bourbon. It's just solid stuff.
Not a bad consolation prize.
No, 2 10s are nice.
We have it hard down here in bourbon country.
Yeah. It taught me to start really loving and appreciating what a bourbon can be. So thank you, Jimmy Russell, and that's always why I'll be a homer, because somebody who didn't really need to take his time did. So I love Turkey's nose. I just think it's great.
Yeah, I think one of the things about Russell's that I like too is, it's high corn. You definitely get that. But the sweetness isn't just overwhelming. It's just really well balanced. That char kind of makes it almost a little bit smoky.
Yeah. Oh, gosh.
It's a bold, robust bourbon too.
Very little. What is this? 90 proof. Yeah, it's 90 proof. So I mean, there's a handshake more than a hug. You feel it all over the mouth. It's warming. Just it's complex. It's bold.
You can taste the char though. I mean.
Oh yeah. But
one thing about Wild Turkey is they have a proprietary yeast strain that they've been guarding for, gosh, how many years? I mean,
didn't they?
50 plus?
Yeah. Who owns them? Campari? Campari owns them now, and when they bought them, they were flipping out because I think Jimmy and them had it in their basement, had it in the refrigerator, just kind of no.
Protect it in the four corners of the world.
Yeah, now it's kind of a little more patented, a little more taken.
Yeah.
But thank you, Jimmy Russell. Taught me to really appreciate and love bourbon besides just collecting it, actually drinking it. And
that's one thing about Russell's. I mean, they really stay true to their quality control process. I feel like you have a Russell's today, you have one tomorrow. They're pretty close. But one thing that I think is real special is if you go out and pick a private selection barrel of Russell's. I mean, those are so unique and so different, and they roll out on barrel picks. Generally, the way it goes, folks, is you might be lucky if you get 3 to 5 barrels to pick from, but you go out there with the Russell's, they'll
8 plus.
they'll pick more barrels than you probably need to drink, to be honest, and you get some wonderful comparisons out there, and you can get something pretty darn special for sure.
So that's when I learned bourbon was better than just collecting. It was meant to drink and enjoy. How about you, John? When did you truly? What's your love? If you
So as I evolved, I would say the next evolution in my preference really came down to barrel strength. I realized that, hey, so I took the training wheels off and I went to ice cubes, and then I went to neat. What's next, right? Where can you go from there? Well, I'll tell you where you can go. You can go to higher proof barrel strength bourbon, and barrel strength bourbon wasn't really highly touted till, it's several years ago, for sure, at least. No, probably longer than that even. Barrel proof started to surface on the market and become a big deal. So for me, I went to one of my favorite steakhouses here in the Kentucky region and looked on the menu, and they had one of the first barrel proof picks ever, and the waiter that presented to me said, hey, there's actually some char chunks in here, which that might scare you guys, but for me, I was like, wow, that sounds pretty awesome. Let's do that.
And if you see this on Facebook Live, we've talked about, if there were char chunks in some 100 proof or lower, people would go nuts in this state. But
so I went with Elijah Craig. I was at Jeff Ruby's in Louisville, amazing steakhouse, and the waiter presented to me an option that was just too good to pass up. It was, hey, we got this bourbon in that's got some barrel char floating around, and you know what? You guys have to give it a try. So how could you say no to that, right? If you're drinking neat bourbon, you want to have something pure. Obviously, char or any sort of floating substances and any other liquor isn't good, or wine, but in bourbon, barrel char, you're like, well, that's legit. Let's give that a shot. So so I tried the 136. Now, this is the legendary Hazmat. We'll talk about this later on an episode, but just know one of the most delicious barrel proofs to come out of all Elijah Craig barrel proofs to begin with. So we're going to have a little bit of pour for that.
Notice we're doing the small size on this one. A little bit goes a long way at 136. What is the proof on this one?
140.2. Anything above that 130, I think it's like the 138 mark, is considered hazard material. You got to label it as such, but
you can't fly in airplanes with it.
Yeah, you'd think it's lighter fluid, but it's delicious. It's
really smooth for what it is. I've had it, and it's a legend.
Just the complexity of the oak, man, that's dark. You can see that coloring.
I don't see any char flavor floating in this, but boy, you can smell it though.
Just the complexity of the tannin. You can taste the leather, that deep pruny raisiness. I love that taste in a bourbon.
Just lifts up the palate. It's quite nice.
But for me, I wasn't drinking ice with this, and so to bring this out neat with a wonderful steak, just blew my mind, honestly. And this was, again, years ago when barrel proof wasn't even super cool yet. So
yeah, talk about Matt Preston early in the Bourbon Society. We did the Heaven Hill tour, and it wasn't much of a tour then. It still kind of borders. And I texted in, they had the Hazmat, and said, so is this worth picking up? And he was like, yes, in capital letters. So, yeah, it got me through at least 2 SEC tournaments. So, yeah, it's good stuff.
So what do you got next?
All right. So, shout out to Seth. 4 Roses Barrel Proof.
Wine and Market, right here local in Lexington.
Back when it was Inateca even. God love Inateca. It was a 2016 pick. It's an OBSF. One of the reasons I really love this, it reminds me of my wife, because one of the things she likes talking about is what bourbon would you be? F is
mint, fruit, spice, and full body.
so
It's one of the 10 recipes of Four Roses that you'll get in a single barrel. Not one that you would find on the shelf readily at all.
So-
The V normally is the one.
112 proof, so it's a little less, but
116.8.
116. It reminds me a lot of Cheryl, because it's and this is the second.
Sassy? Cheryl, your wife's sassy? Is that what you're saying, James?
No, I'm saying it's really sweet,
Okay.
but it's got, well, the way I've described it, and I've had this is the second bottle, and if you've looked on my Facebook page, I had this with the guys in Las Vegas for Jared's birthday. It's kind of like a caramel wrapped around a jalapeno pepper. It's really sweet, but boy, it will bite you. And it's kind of like my wife. She's really sweet, but if you mess with her, she'll bite you.
Fellas, it sounds like a lot of women you might have in your life out there, but
That nose.
Man, that's got a great
is
nose.
so sweet. But it hides a secret.
we love Brent Elliott out there, Four Roses Master Distiller. Al Young, local to Lexington. Man, he's a legend, working with Four Roses for 50 years. I mean, just what a
Wonderful
great
master.
bourbon Four Roses is, honestly. I'm a huge fan, and
Oh yeah. So when I decided that truly love, if I had to say I love, this is I love my wife. I love this bourbon. It reminds me of her. But it's just got that. It's got that kick in the end.
I definitely get that mintiness to it, like a peppermint mint.
Yeah. And
It's full bodied. Doesn't hit you hard. Doesn't knock you off your feet.
until the very end. That finish just kind of lights you up.
That's a hug. That's
Yeah.
a Kentucky hug. We talk about that, but that definitely will get you at the end.
Yeah, the great video. If you check Facebook, Boys Night, we had this for Jared's birthday. Really enjoyed it. I had to go back and get a second bottle because it was so good, and cracked it just for this episode. So great. So your unicorn, the one you truly love.
My coup d'etat. Everybody asks what's your favorite bourbon. Well, I'll tell you what. It's normally the one you're pouring. I'm not that big of a bourbon snob, even though I've tried a lot of stuff. But I'll tell you one that made me sit down and think about my life a little bit. That was this guy right here. I think you might want to consider this a unicorn.
Yeah, it's a unicorn.
Used to find these in the gift shop at Willett Distillery everywhere. Pretty much every weekend you go out there and buy one if you wanted to. Now they were pricey back then, $250. Maybe they went up to $350 when it was all said and done. On the secondary market, gosh, who knows, $3,000, $6,000. It's ridiculous nowadays. But this is a 25-year rye. It's one of just a few bottles that were out of a barrel. We're talking about
And that
barrel number 1777, 108 bottles in that barrel. What a small limited run. Wax top Willett fans, go nuts. Sure, I got a few of these. No, I won't share it. But
look at the color on that.
But look at that color.
Jet black.
And that's a rye, guys. I mean, that is a 25-year aged rye. That's something that you're not going to see every day, but man, the first time I had this, I went out to Bardstown and I tasted it and I said, that is amazing. Just the complexity and the flavor.
You don't have to crack that for this.
Oh, we're doing it.
Okay.
We're doing it. For science.
For science, yes.
So the
And
viscosity
honestly,
on this,
I have to say, I have not had this. John is quite generous, and I was raised to not just grab, to ask, so I've never... And you've had this put aside, haven't you?
and these come in these tubes, which I don't even know if they have them anymore, but I mean, when you got a Willett family estate, you felt pretty darn good about it years ago, and now everybody's kind of collecting, and it's an esteem thing. But I'll tell you, I used to drink these out at the lake here in Kentucky. I'm a good old boy, and I enjoy these. I drink these, and just the nose on that, right? It's raisiny.
Can I be honest? It reminds me of a cognac more than a whiskey. Which I like cognac, so I'm pretty well down with it.
It's like rose petal water and raisin.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's also a rye, so it's no longer. It's not a bourbon. In 23 years, you're getting
25.
more. 25. God bless. Wow.
Just kind of opens up. It's effervescent. It's floral. It's almost perfume like.
Yeah. Once again, this borders more of a cognac than it does.
It does.
A whiskey.
It's like a fine liqueur.
Yeah. You just.
Now, no, this was a sourced rye, so it could have came from. Likely it came from MGP or Seagram's.
Yeah, Heaven Hill even.
They can't disclose that just in the event that you don't like it or something comes back to the brand. But I mean, they had a lot of debate on if it came from Bernheim or Heaven Hill. My thought is for a fine rye, Seagram's and MGP really kind of are on the map for that. But man, this is one of those unicorns that if you ever get a chance to try, I would say do it.
But technically, 25 years ago, that would have been a Four Roses. Yeah, that was pretty much pre-Kieran days almost, wasn't it? Yeah, so that's, jeez, outstanding.
All right, what do you got left?
All right. If you've seen that earlier episodes, yeah, I collected makers because I liked weeders. This didn't used to be hard to find, but there was someone decided they could come up with poor man's Pappy, and this was half the ingredient, so it kind of screwed up us getting this anymore. It's Weller 12. I know people I've worked with who've been in the industry 8+ years and say they used to trip over this because it was in the way, but now you can't get any more. It's an amazing anything 10+ in a weeder. Anything 10+ in a bourbon is amazing. 10+ in a weeder just gets really complex and good. It's Weller 12.
Now the distillery will tell you that Weller 12 isn't the same as Old Rip Old Rip, which is 107 proof, or Lot B, which is their 12 year. But to be honest, it's the same mash bill. And to be truthful, other than some private barrel select 107s. I think Weller 12 is better than either of those products. I mean, that's coming from me, but the drinkability on this, the proof, the consistency on it.
When you can find it, if you could find this price at retail, because it's under $30 or 30
retail?
At the most.
No,
yeah.
it's higher than that now, 45.
Okay, some places I work
for this, it's 60.
Yeah.
I want to say, but 30, 35, 40.
For a 750, it just, it's really outstanding. It's just, if you could find it by 2, it's.
So why Weller 12? What made that your kind of?
It's a caramel hug. It's just, it
represents everything that's right about bourbon, doesn't it?
I agree.
It's that limestone kind of filtered, flavored water. Even though it's reverse osmosis.
Okay, to quote Spinal Tap, it's bourbon on 11. Everyone loves caramel and vanilla. Let's take caramel and vanilla and turn it up to 11. Yeah, everyone can make it one louder, but this is just what, bourbon can be when it's oomphed up. People used to trip over it because they couldn't sell it, but poor man's Pappy came along, kind of ruined everything. I do have a couple at the house. It's nice to have. I do have a 175. It's just really good. So
if you can find it, pick it up for sure.
Pick 1 to 2.
It's a great one.
So this is how we fell in love with bourbon.
I mean, this was our evolution.
Yep.
All great picks. All good stuff. You can find any of these. We would highly recommend picking them up, guys, for sure. But
you're not going to find a 25-year-old, will it?
Well, I'm sure you can find it, but might cost you a little bit. So
Weller 12, you will be in line. If you can get it at retail, is well worth it. Even if you can get it a little over retail on other markets that we don't endorse or deny, it's still worth it. It's quite a good bourbon. One of my favorites. It's basically bourbon turned to 11. It's great.
If there's any sort of retrospect that I can give out of that journey that we just took, for me it was try bourbon in different ways. Try it neat, try it on the rocks. God forbid, if you need to, mix it. Let it open it up. Let it open up. Let it sit for a little bit. Try barrel proof. To me, barrel proof is one of those special things where if you can add your own water, it's pretty cool, because then you can kind of dial in on where your sweet spot is, what the different flavor profiles are that you look like. But even different types of water can have an effect.
Limestone water, which is out there. But, bourbon is an evolution, and it takes a little time to learn. But, learn and grow. And our picks might not be your picks, but, grow with it and learn it. And that's kind of what we've loved. And that's...
Experimentation is the funnest part about it, folks.
Amen. And the drinking.
All right, well, to that, this is another episode of Let's Talk Bourbon. We'll see you guys soon. If you like what you see, subscribe and comment down below. But in the meantime, cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Take care.